Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Why We Geek, the show where we take a piece of geek culture, whether it be big or small, and we take it apart and we show you guys why we love it, and in some cases why we hate it, and why we want to be able to fix it. But today we don't have to worry about the hatred, because this is the second of the major geek fandoms that we're going to be covering. Earlier this year, we covered Star Trek. It was me and Brenton, and we had a fun time while being able to do it. And today we get to take on the opposing fandom, because we're going to be taking on the space fantasy itself, Star Wars. And the coolest part about this is that I'm not alone, because this is actually going to be kind of a paired episode. So if you're only a fan of my podcast, Why We Geek, this is also going to be paired into a part 2 for Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the other podcast that I run, and it's appropriate that we do that because I have the exact same panel that I would on a regular Geek News episode. So I'll go ahead and introduce them now, my fellow geeks, my fellow panelists, my fellow awesome guys in general. We're going to start things off with Brenton Volley of Brenton Volley Gaming. How are you doing tonight?
Feeling traitorous.
Traitorous?
Yeah, because I was talking about Star Trek, now I'm with Star Wars, so...
But J.J. Abrams brought them together.
I know, but I'm smiling as I say traitorous.
Oh, all right. I'll take that.
I have no qualms sitting right here, right now.
No, you don't. And then we also are being joined by the Shadow Blazer himself, Alex Short. How are you doing tonight, Alex?
I'm doing pretty well. Just got out of Star Wars, so I guess you could say the Force is with me.
Yeah, this is kind of the pairing, is that we're going to be taking on Star Wars as kind of a general subject, and then the part 2 of this is that we're going to be going into our group review of The Last Jedi. So if you guys want to know our opinions on that, you need to listen to that. But finally, we are also being joined by the one guy that needs to be here for film analysis and legal knowledge and all of that, is Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, from the Shelf, Romney's Reviews, Rhapsody in Cinema, Monster Clash. Is there anything I left out on that list?
No, I think you've got everything.
All right. And so, like I said, today we're going to be talking about Star Wars. And this is kind of a general one because Star Wars, kind of like Star Trek, I would actually say Star Wars is a little bit bigger, especially when you dip into the expanded universe canon. Because unlike Star Trek, a lot more people have wanted to write for Star Wars, have wanted to do additional stories for it. I'm not knocking Star Trek, but Star Trek has been kind of picky with their authors. So at that point, you don't have a whole lot of expanded universe aside from what you've seen in the TV shows. Star Wars, however, is huge. So that's why this is going to be kind of a general subject. And for people who are hoping that maybe we would talk about expanded universe canon, like say shows like Clone Wars or Rebels or the upcoming live action series that we've been hearing about, that's why this is a cool thing, is because we can branch into other episodes talking about those specifically. I mean, for crying out loud, I have no problem talking about the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars because there's more than enough stuff to delve into there. But today we're going to be taking on Star Wars in general, and we're going to cover as much ground as we possibly can, starting first with the usual question I start these podcasts off with: what was your first exposure to Star Wars, and what is your most beloved, the one that defines you as a Star Wars fan? This is difficult to answer for most Star Wars fans because you have to actually equate it to a trilogy. That's usually how people understand this, because usually they're seeing the movies first. But as an added bonus, if you want to show off like your favorite expanded universe canon, you're more than welcome to do that as well. I'll go ahead and go first, and that is my first moment. I've been told as a kid, I went to go see Empire Strikes Back as a kid. I don't remember that very well, because I think the film hit in like 1985, didn't it?
1980.
1980. So yeah, I wouldn't have even been born. So Return of the Jedi probably would have been my first film. And I don't remember that until much, much, much later when we rented it at a local video store and I got to see Star Wars for the first time in my memory. So Return of the Jedi is really my favorite and still a longtime favorite, even though I do enjoy the other films later on. Return of the Jedi is pretty much the crux of everything that I loved about the original trilogy, and everything that I love about the story that current movies are even trying to tell to this day. The reason that I love it even more, funniest thing, is not even the movies. The expanded universe is what got me in. Because the more ideas that you heard explored in the expanded universe, the more awesome things got. Especially when in the prequel trilogy, we were all into the lightsaber fighting. So that was like the perfect time to go and look into the Old Republic and all of the lore surrounding the Jedi and the Sith. But if you were into the original trilogy and you wanted the dogfights and whatnot, there were video games to go check that out, like X-Wing and TIE Fighter and Dark Forces and numerous others. So really the expanded universe to me is like what keeps me a Star Wars fan, because the movies are great and all, but the movies are sparse and few and far between. So that's kind of my answer for it. Let's go ahead and go round with Romney. What is the moment that got you a fan, and what is the thing that keeps you a fan?
Well, the very first memory I have with Star Wars, and a lot of people are probably going to cry sacrilege when I say this, but the very first exposure I had was to the first special edition versions, because the very first time I saw Star Wars was when they were doing the theatrical re-release of the special editions. And so the first one I saw in theaters, and I actually don't remember much of watching the actual movie, I think I fell asleep because I was a kid, was the special edition re-release of A New Hope. And then I remember that we then tried watching a showing of Empire Strikes Back, but we came in the middle, so when we got into the theater, Luke was crashing into Dagobah, so I didn't even get to see the Battle on Hoth until we got the VHS tapes.
Yeah.
But as for the moment where I actually got enthralled and actually considered myself a Star Wars fan, and again, kind of embarrassing, but it would have to be when I watched The Phantom Menace. Now, again, it is not a perfect film, but in the mindset of 10-year-old me, it was my first real exposure to Star Wars, to kind of the fervor of it all. And honestly, the moment that kind of made me interested in the franchise was, well, the duel with the battle against Darth Maul. I thought it was so amazing. I had bugged my dad, and we saw the film 2 more times, and it was seeing just the choreography of it all. That's kind of what drew me in. That was when I was actually hooked on Star Wars. That's when I went back, rewatched the original trilogy, tried reading some of the expanded universe stuff, but I wasn't really much of a reader. I tried skimming through parts of some of the other novels they released, like Jedi Apprentice, which was focused on Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon during the days of training, which it has its issues.
Yeah.
And so as for what keeps me a fan, well, I'm not as much into the extended universe. At least I wasn't until Lucasfilm was bought by Disney and they did the clean sweep of, okay, all of this older stuff is no longer canon.
Which was probably beneficial for you.
Yeah, because it gave me a good jumping on point, because then I then read Before the Awakening, which goes into detail with Poe Dameron, Finn, and Rey and where they came from. I bought a copy of the book, but I still need to actually read it, and that's Lost Stars, which is basically goes into more detail of what kind of the minutia of the Empire and the Rebellion. And so having this clean slate gave me a better jumping on point to get into the extended universe. So what kind of is keeping me as a fan, not just because of the legacy the franchise has had on film history, but just kind of how it's shaped film in general. And that's kind of more why I keep coming back to each of the movies, is to see, okay, now that it's away from George, what can these new up and coming filmmakers bring to the table? And again, people have heard my opinions about The Force Awakens, and they've heard how excited I was when Rian Johnson was pegged as a director. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from, is kind of in how it's going to affect film industry going forward, because we now have a bunch of filmmakers who grew up with these movies now sitting in the director's chair, and it's away from the controlling hands of George. And I know a lot of people are quick to say, oh, George is awful, but well, I kind of feel sorry for him. I see him as kind of a tragic figure in all this, but we can go into more detail on that later.
Yeah.
As for my favorite extended universe, Star Wars spin-off, I guess, aside from the only good version of Star Wars Battlefront 2, so one that actually tells an original story.
Yep, about the 501st Legion.
Yeah, but thinking of ones that I like because of the story that it tells, it's a tough call, but I partially do have a bit of a soft spot for Shadows of the Empire, and kind of particularly the game, because, well, the early parts of the game are pretty cool, but of course there's always the dreaded sewer level.
Shadows had actually a lot of really great ideas on paper. The fact that it was bridging a gap between episodes. I mean, that I would actually dare say Shadows of the Empire, or Clone Wars, at least the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars, owes its existence to Shadows of the Empire.
The existence of the prequels actually owes its existence, because that was Lucas testing the waters to see, okay, if I'm able to get people into the series without a movie, with all this merchandise and everything, it kind of tested the waters saying, hey, there's still demand, let's actually go forward and make these movies.
Well, but not only that, but taking taking events in between the movies. Sorry, guys, we're running on a little bit more of a portable setup, so if we have random sounds here and there, I'll try and cut them out as best as possible. But the fact that we got to see little things like Luke building the green lightsaber that we eventually saw in Return of the Jedi, that was an amazing thing to be able to see. And the other cool part is that when you mix that in with the prequels, you will know that some of the parts used to build that lightsaber were Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber. So at that point, there's so much more to take away from that. And the expanded universe canon just helps with that whole concept. The other thing I find interesting is you brought up that your favorite is The Phantom Menace. And
it's actually not my favorite. That was just the film that made me a Star Wars fan.
The thing that introduced you, but then what was the next thing you mentioned? The duel with Darth Maul and Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn. And in a lot of ways, I actually considered it to be kind of, in my honest opinion, Star Wars has gateway drug movies. And the reason I do is because it gives you that first surge of adrenaline from what the focus, in my opinion, of that trilogy is going to be. So in this case, A New Hope with the Death Star attack gave you dogfighting, which is what became the main focus of the original trilogy. And the duel with Maul gave us lightsaber fighting, which is what really defined the Clone Wars era and the prequel trilogy. So it's pretty awesome to be able to do that. And then, as you guys will hear later on, I would actually dare say this new trilogy has found a really wonderful way to blend both into being a gateway drug.
I guess you could say it is finding a balance.
It has found a balance in the Force.
Gosh.
Alex, what is your first exposure into Star Wars, and what is your favorite by far? I don't know if you could actually go too much into expanded universe.
Not really, but we'll get to that. My story is actually pretty similar to Romney's. It's in the mid-90s, they began re-releasing the films into theaters. That's where I saw it. My parents took me and my older sister and probably my older brother, I can't remember, but they took us to go see A New Hope in theaters. I was still pretty young, so I don't remember a lot of New Hope in the theater experience. I think I recall maybe like walking into a Ron theater when I went out to go to the bathroom, which was still playing A New Hope, but it was like at a different point in the films, which is why I was able to catch on quickly and not sit through the movie in the whole Ron theater. But
yeah,
we didn't see Empire in theaters. I think my parents just decided we probably wouldn't have the attention span or whatever to sit through it. So they went out and they bought it on videotape. And that's how I saw Empire, was on videotape. I still enjoyed it. And then when Return of the Jedi came about, we went and saw Return of the Jedi in theaters. And I'd say Return of the Jedi was really what solidified me, because that was the movie I can remember holding my attention a lot easier than A New Hope probably did. Although I think I enjoyed A New Hope, obviously.
So the one question that I want to bring to you in this regard is that you say your first exposure was the new CG-ified trilogy that people don't like. I know that eventually you got access to the original films.
It wasn't the CG. This was the pre-CG.
Yeah, like
this was
this was the very first special editions.
Like the THX mastered one that happened. Okay,
yeah,
all right.
This is the one that the videotapes, I think, were pretty much based off.
Yeah, okay. the gold box tapes, because I still have my tapes.
The gold box ones were the ones that were modified. So like those were the ones that added scenes like Jabba the Hutt and New Hope and all that stuff. So
I didn't have those scenes. As far as I remember, never.
So you saw what you're talking about is what I think has affectionately been called the black cover tapes.
Yeah, the black cover tapes.
Yeah,
where
it was basically they were brought up to a better definition and better sound, things like that.
Yeah, essentially as close as theoretically possible, because we know that Lucas has long since been changing the film gradually over the years, even since it came out in 77. So I don't know exactly the extent. It's been a long time since I've seen the original black and the original black box. I just remember what's been changed when it came to DVD. Yeah. And that's what I remember most. But it was Return of the Jedi that really solidified me as a fan, I guess you could say. And when we had them on videotape, I mean, I watched those tapes to death. I'd watch them all the time. Every occasion I felt like it, I'd watch it. And I'd even sit through those. Sometimes I'd sit through them anyway. I'd sit through those long Leonard Maltin interviews with George Lucas that preceded each one. And
I'll admit, I did it once or twice, but just because nothing against Lucas, but eventually Lucas kind of gets rambly when he's talking. But I could totally understand kind of your point of view on the matter. And some of those interviews, like for the first time, were amazing to be able to see his insight into what he wanted done, even when it was a different director in charge, like what he tried to influence into the film to keep his vision going. And then, expanded universe canon. I don't know if we can really delve.
Not too much, because I've never gotten really deep into the expanded universe canon. I guess I could.
You've seen the Gendy ones.
Yeah, I can concur also with Romney that Shadows of the Empire for the N64, at least for me. I never read the book or any of the comics or anything, but I played the hell out of the N64 game, and I love that game still. It's a little clunky, but it's an early N64 game.
This is bringing me
expect?
back to like our Dragon Shadow playthrough, and then realizing just how much of the expanded universe you didn't know.
It's true. I didn't know. I don't know much
because like you didn't realize that Dash and Shizor actually had canon after that, and you're like, oh, really? They did?
Yeah. Another close instance I came to really learning more of the expanded universe. My sister, she had this big character book. It was a big character guide, and I never really read through the whole text, but I'd always like read the basic stats of every character that they'd list. So it's like, oh, first appearance was this, and death was this, and sometimes I'd skim a little of the text. I don't know if she still has that book. That I might need to actually sit down and read it one day.
At some point, we do need to introduce you to like a few other characters that I think you would. I honestly am pegging you as a lover of Grand Admiral Thrawn. I really think you would love that character.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, like you and me will need to sit down, maybe watch Rebels, or maybe even do a playthrough of, I think TIE Fighter is what he showed up in.
And I know that there is a new Thrawn novel that Timothy Zahn wrote that was given the official blessing by Lucasfilm as part of the new EU. So
because Timothy Zahn is God as far as Star Wars authors is concerned. Okay, then we have Brinton. So what was your first moment into Star Wars canon? And the moment that keeps you a fan, but also like an expanded universe moment, if you have one.
Well, I can already say right now that I don't have an expanded universe moment in any sense of the word.
You say that, but then I'll go and find something, and I'll be like, "Oh, it is expanded universe." You'd be like, "Ah, darn it."
Well, I mean, I'm sitting here trying to think of something specifically to answer, and I'm just like, I don't think
You've watched Rebels, haven't you?
Like the TV show?
Yeah.
No.
Clone Wars?
No.
Really? And you haven't played any of the Star Wars games that came out?
Nope.
Holy crap, man. Now I really feel old.
I didn't, not to make you feel older, but I really didn't know any of that stuff was a thing, to be completely honest. My first exposure to Star Wars was my mom, who grew up with the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And so that was a thing in our household. I think I've even mentioned this in prior occasions where you and I have chatted, and our viewers have been listening. But but essentially, I was in a Star Wars family. I can't exactly remember. I'm pretty sure it was A New Hope. I don't really have a concrete memory of watching the original trilogy when it was when my mom introduced it to my sisters and I. But what kept me going actually was when I saw episode 3. I didn't know that they had done a prequel trilogy, to be completely honest.
Oh, so you're talking Revenge of the Sith, and then you didn't realize there were other movies before it.
Yeah, so I saw the original trilogy.
And I wish I thought you did, because that's really all the only prequel I needed.
Yeah, it my Star Wars it's so weird how I got into this universe, because my mom introduced me and me and my sisters to the originals, which I watched, and then I didn't even know they made a prequel 1, prequel 2, and then a friend of mine when I was a freshman in high school was I think I was 8th grade, and he was like, let's skip the last day of school and go see Star Wars, and I was like, what do you mean let's go see Star Wars? Just go to your house and see Star Wars? And he told me, no, it's in the theaters, episode 3. And so he had to
wow.
Yeah, I had no idea they made episode 1 and 2, and had told this whole story about essentially how Darth Vader became Darth Vader. Obviously the movie I saw was him, Anakin becoming Darth Vader, but I was just like, oh.
The thing that's dumbfounding me here is we've come across the one guy that probably doesn't hate Jake Lloyd, and the one guy that doesn't have a whole lot of reason to hate Hayden Christensen.
Oh, And to be fair, I don't like, as someone who's seen the prequels, I don't really hate.
I don't hate Jake
I don't
either,
hate him.
but I love the fact that the internet stigma is that everybody hates Jake Lloyd.
See, like, that's the funny thing. I've had people ask me, oh, you must not like the prequels if you're a Star Wars fan. And I'm like, actually, I enjoy the prequels quite a lot.
Three's amazing.
Yeah.
As I'm concerned.
I mean, I would say, as of right now, 3 is my favorite film out of like the 8 plus Rogue One that I've watched.
Really?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Okay.
I honestly really, really, really enjoy the prequels.
That's just funny to me because I think you said Return of the Jedi as well.
Well, yeah, like because for me, like Return of the Jedi is my favorite of the films because of a
You said
particular
Return of
scene.
the Jedi. I said Return of the Jedi. So we both all said like the end of the original trilogy. You're saying the end of the prequel trilogy is
cool.
what gotcha.
So I'm
The
kind
ending
of
movies that got us all.
I'm just kind of the outlier with what I prefer. I mean, don't get me wrong, Jar Jar Binks is hella annoying, but I mean,
And no, Jar Jar Binks is not a Sith Lord.
that would be. That would be so bad if he just like pops out of nowhere and it's like, okay, sorry. Like, if Disney legitimately does that, it will ruin Star Wars for me.
I still remember like going out of my way to read somebody's weird out there theory that Jar Jar was really Snoke. And somehow he lost his beak and he lost all of the distinct features that made him Gungan. And he was like, no. If Snoke is Jar Jar, then I'm done with this trilogy. I am officially done.
Well, if he is, then Jar Jar Binks is dead again.
Well, he's dead either way.
He is officially gone, hopefully. No, he'll come back somehow.
Of course,
But
as a Sith Lord always does.
But yeah, like my story is pretty simple. I think my mom more or less, well, not more or less, pretty much I thank her 100% for getting me into Star Wars.
Okay.
And then I thank my friend for, I don't even think I talked to him anymore. That's besides the point. I thank him for re-inviting me back into the saga. And then I've just been I've been watching it here and there. Really what keeps me into the fandom, because as we have all confirmed, I know nothing of the extended universe. It's really the movies. It's really the movies for me. When Nathan and I had our first foster son, we were trying to get him into the Star Wars universe because we had bought him a ticket for.
Is Nathan into the expanded universe?
I mean, we're a Star Wars couple. We're a Star Wars power couple. We love Star Wars.
I have to fix this now. I have to fix this. You guys need to like at some point. I just need to sit you and Alex down and show you Grand Admiral Thrawn, and just show you like some of the awesome characters that have come out of this. For crying out loud, Darth Revan.
I'm totally down for like delving into the expanded universe because I'm gonna have to tie some time over before the Han Solo movie comes out, and we have 2 years before Episode 9.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I have plenty of time to get myself into it.
But unfortunately, we're still on kind of borrowed time, at least until we can get into the Last Jedi stuff. So let's go into the next question here. And one of the things that is most beloved that a lot of Star Wars fans can agree is the characters of the Star Wars universe. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people go towards... they either go towards the default Skywalkers or they go to like the beloved Han Solos and whatnot. So here's what I'm going to do in this regard, okay? And as a bonus, if you want to bring up an expanded universe character, if you can, you can. But I know. But the way I'm going to say this is your favorite. I'm going to say Skywalker, but really what I mean is like a protagonist. Okay, so like the main focused hero that we follow. So to bring people into up to speed here, Luke would be the one of the original trilogy. Then Anakin obviously would be the prequel one, and then Rey technically would count in that Skywalker role in the current trilogy. So your favorite main character, and then also a favorite side character that maybe doesn't get a whole lot of spotlight. Because here's the thing, Star Wars is an amazing universe, and a lot of good characters just don't get enough credit in this expanded, not just an expanded universe, in canon universe. They don't really get a whole lot of credit. I especially love when we do have expanded shows that go into the canon of Mon Mothma, and we don't realize like how awesome a character she is. So mine obviously is going to be Luke. I have so many problems with Anakin, I really do, and most of them involving sand and his chiclet teeth and the fact that he's forever destroying himself because of his love and all of that stuff. I can't necessarily get behind Anakin, but Luke I felt was the best protagonist to follow. He's just an average guy. It was almost like an Arthurian story compared to Anakin, where he's just a lowly little farm boy, and he realizes that he has a greater destiny ahead of him, and you got to follow him as he learned the truth, and as he learned how to make his way in life. And I find that a little bit appropriate considering Last Jedi. But Luke is probably my favorite main protagonist, and if I were to point out a favorite side character within it, I'm gonna get hatred for this because I don't like Han. I hate Han with a blinding passion.
How can you hate Han?
I don't like Han. I never did.
Well, I mean, he is a scoundrel.
He's a scoundrel, but at the same time, like, I'm not the biggest fan of Westerns. And when I looked at Han, I went, okay, he's supposed to be the space cowboy. And I'm like, no, I'm not into that. My favorite expanded is a very rigorous tie between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. Because especially in the original trilogy, them being mentor characters is an amazing thing to see. Because some of my favorite scenes are Yoda in Empire Strikes Back when he's trying to teach Luke, and then another favorite of mine in Return of the Jedi is when Obi-Wan finally starts telling the truth to Luke, and we start getting his viewpoint. And in fact, one of my favorite Alec Guinness lines is, "So what I told you was true from a certain point of view," kind of thing. I love that. It grays up the trilogy so much for my liking. And then my favorite expanded universe character, at least for now, it's actually a tie between Ahsoka Tano and Sabine Wren. Oh my gosh, Rebels has done such amazing things with the former apprentice of Anakin Skywalker, and also the last of the I can't even remember she's the heir apparent of the Wren clan of Mandalore, but she is also a very distant relation to I can't ever remember his name. It's like Pre Vizsla. She's kind of the last of the line of Pre Vizsla, and therefore is one of the strongest Mandalorian clans. And they've done such amazing things with her in Rebels, including putting the Darksaber, the fabled Darksaber, in her hands. And the story that they've been able to tell with her it made me cry, Britton. It made me cry. The stuff that you learn about Sabine Wren. Romney, who would you say is your favorite main character and then your favorite side character?
Well, in this case, the favorite character overall, I would kind of argue that they're more the main character of the prequels than Anakin, and that would have to be Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, from Phantom Menace all the way through he is my favorite character.
So Ewan and Alec is what you're saying.
Yeah, both Ewan and Alec.
Okay.
And just kind of seeing kind of the journey. Granted, it wasn't communicated in the best of ways, but seeing how Obi-Wan kind of grows into the character most people know and love, I find that pretty fascinating. And it's kind of more or less the character I more or less, at least growing up as a kid, was someone I kind of tried modeling myself after, trying to be kind of more like, okay, not giving into anger, trying to be more calm, more stoic, I guess, but still able to, throw down if I need to.
Yep.
It was
that bike is not liking you right now.
Well, yeah, and basically,
why don't you bring the cord to me, and then we'll see if we can fix this. There we go.
Yeah, and so to me, like, Obi-Wan is kind of my favorite character. It kind of is the character I tried more or less emulating in my own life. I mean, it is kind of part of the reason why I actually started studying martial arts as a kid as well, was trying to kind of reach that point. Like, I didn't really honestly believe that I would actually become a Jedi, although I did write my fair share of Star Wars fan fiction as a kid as well, so...
Well, and
gosh.
The cool part about Obi-Wan is that, like, I would actually say that's the one thing that's enjoyable about the prequel trilogy, is seeing Obi-Wan's development. Because you literally get Padawan in Phantom Menace, you get Jedi in Attack of the Clones, and then you get Jedi Master in Revenge of the Sith. And then eventually you get beyond that in what he's learned.
Mm-hmm. And the important thing, and that's one of the things that I believe that at least Episode 3 did right, is that, yeah, he was a good master, but he was not infallible. He did make mistakes, as is the case with when Anakin turned. It's something that could have been handled better, but it's something that even Obi-Wan in Empire acknowledged, where in both New Hope and Empire acknowledged, where he thought he could be like Master Yoda. He thought he had what it took to train someone like Anakin, but ultimately that didn't work out. And it very much is a case of, it's very much the classic case of, oh, you may think you're wise, but, well, you got to be careful, because if you act with hubris, things happen, and, well, things did. And that's kind of why I like the journey Obi-Wan takes as a character across all 6 movies, is that you see, like, the faint glimmers of Obi-Wan, seeing him, like, he's fully internalized the philosophy of the Jedi, but at the same time, he's kind of assumed that. Now, granted, not handled the best way, but it's very much a case where you can see it almost as a trait he picked up from Qui-Gon, who was a master who clearly liked bending the rules, where it's a case of, oh, well, clearly Qui-Gon saw something in this kid, so I guess I'll keep my promise, I'll train him and try to make him a good Jedi, and then the Clone Wars happened, and all the craziness involved, and so, yeah, so pretty much favorite character across the whole franchise is Obi-Wan Kenobi. As for, like, favorite side character... It's tough to say.
What's even cooler about that is, like, I would actually, if you love the development of Obi-Wan, I would actually encourage you to watch Clone Wars, because you learn so much more about the character that fleshes him out even more. Like, I don't even think the prequels tell you his origin. Like, they don't tell you where he came from. And Clone Wars did, and he is one in the long line of Mandalorian Jedi. And so when you actually learn that and you know the Mandalorian culture, which for those who don't know it, Boba Fett, Jango Fett, all come from this. Then his headstrongness, his stubbornness actually starts to make sense. He comes from a warrior race.
Yeah, and yeah, that's one series I keep meaning to get into. It's just, well, there's only so many hours in the day to watch a lot of things, and that was why I tried getting into the Jedi Apprentice novels that were made before Clone Wars.
And I think those are based off the Obi-Wan game.
Sort of.
Where they try to show some of the accomplishments that Obi-Wan had as a Padawan.
Yeah.
Before he was brought on by Qui-Gon.
Well, yeah, it's just with Jedi Apprentice, it more or less tried to focus on the relationship between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
Okay.
It just over the course of the novels, because I got bored after the first book, but my older brother kept reading on to, like, the 12th book. And these were, like, junior scholastic novels that they would sell at book fairs. And so over the course of that series, it became more about Qui-Gon, because then there was this case of, oh, another failed apprentice of Qui-Gon becomes, like, a recurring villain in those books.
I can't remember his name, but yeah, he fell to the dark side, and so you have to have the conflicts with him.
Yeah, I think they called him, like, Xanatos or Thanatos or something.
Yeah, he took on, like, a full-on Darth name, I think.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where I kind of got bored with it just because I didn't have the attention span to actually try reading seriously, just because I'm a visual thinker. I think in visuals. That's why I'm going into film, not so much into writing. And so, yeah, so side characters, there's not really any particular side characters that come to mind that I particularly pay attention to, because, again, I didn't really try jumping into the extended universe until Disney made the clean sweep and gave a good starting point. So I guess good starting point wise of the new expanded universe, it's hard. It really is hard to say, because there's not really much that's coming to mind, because I guess the best thing I like from Before the Awakening is the short story where it kind of explored who Finn was when he was a stormtrooper and kind of some of the side characters he trained with.
Even the stuff with Poe is really interesting and gives you kind of a real look into why he is the flyboy that he is.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. And then, Alex, your favorite main protagonist and then favorite side character.
Yeah, I'd also say Obi-Wan Kenobi's my favorite, just because, besides the fact Luke Skywalker's obvious answer, but I like Luke enough. But I like Obi-Wan Kenobi because he does have perhaps the most complete arc of every character that we see. Because we do see him go from lone apprentice to master to fallen master, then he's essentially the one to reassimilate with the Force and continue to mentor Luke a little more beyond.
He's technically the second one to do it.
Yeah. So I'd say I agree with I like Obi-Wan Kenobi because I think he's a great mentor character. And
see, and the best part about that, since we brought up the ghost thing, is, like, remember how much he loved Qui-Gon. Like, he looked at him as a father figure. Technically, Obi-Wan has done what Qui-Gon couldn't, because Qui-Gon never ascended.
Yeah, he did.
Well, yeah, he did. At the end of
Clone Wars canon actually establishes this. He halfway did it. He didn't completely do it, and he couldn't do it because he lost his body before he could. So at that point, this is actually a really cool thing, and I would recommend, if you can get onto Netflix, watch the last season of Clone Wars, because it actually explains where Yoda learns how to become like a Force ghost, and how he had to learn it, because the person that actually guides him and leads him to Dagobah, a lot of people thought, no, he discovered Dagobah through the Force and all that. No, he was led there first by Qui-Gon to then say, here is your destiny, here's what you need to learn, here's where you need to go to learn it, kind of thing. And that's why he goes to Dagobah at the end of episode 3. So yes, I'm ogling expanded universe in here, but that's the cool thing about Star Wars, guys, is that its universe is huge, it's vast, it's got so many stories with so many amazing characters to be able to follow.
Yeah, it sounds like I need to delve into it a little bit more, because that was just that little bit of information is like, ooh, that's cool.
Oh no, those episodes are awesome because not only do you learn like this is how he actually has to ascend this, but then you actually get to see Yoda go through some major trials. He has to go with like the diametric opposites. He has to go with the ultra light, and then he has to go to Moraban and confront his dark side to be able to learn how to do this properly.
Wow.
So at that point, it's an amazing thing, and the best part about it is that they actually brought in Mark Hamill. The first time he ever got brought into Clone Wars, he was brought in to play an ancient Sith Lord, Darth Bane, the very one that created Always Two There Are, No More, No Less. The very Darth that created the rule of two. Mark Hamill played him.
So I guess that's still canon then.
It has actually still canon. Clone Wars, Rebels, and then all of the stuff that's come after Force Awakens is considered canon. But, so, I interrupted you on that one because you were saying Obi-Wan, and then I don't think you got to your side character.
I suppose side character, I like Lando, mostly because of the way Bill...
Good for you. I don't like Lando, and the reason I don't is because Battlefront 2.
Yeah, well, nobody cares about Battlefront 2. I mean, if you're talking EA Battlefront 2, I guess, yeah.
Yes, the character they made him, he's seriously like a stealth character. It's frustrating.
Yeah, well, I've always liked Lando because I always liked Billy D. Williams. I think he's very charismatic and charming in that character.
Okay. All right, and then Brinton, your favorite main character and your side character for the Star Wars trilogy.
So I'm laughing because I want to answer the side one first, but I'm not going to. Anyway, I would say Luke Skywalker for me as well. And for my favorite main character, and my thoughts and feelings are extremely similar to what you've already stated, Adam. I'm like I look at him as an underdog, and I'm just a sucker for underdog stories.
Yeah.
I mean, they could be so poorly written, and I would still... I'm just a sucker for an underdog. So
Yeah.
That's Luke Skywalker for me. It's cool to see his journey, to see where he gets. And then it's been fun to see who he has become in the most recent film and see how he contributes to
Yes.
the current trilogy. So, but of course that will be more for later.
Yes.
My favorite side character, Chewbacca.
There has to be love for Chewie. There has to be. And here's the thing. I love Chewie way more than I love Han. And part of that is because I love it when Chewie mouths off to Han.
My reason for it is because when my mom watched Star Wars for the first time, my love for Chewbacca comes from my mom's love of Chewbacca.
Okay.
She said that she would go to school and all the girls would be like, "Oh, I want to be Princess Leia. I want to be Princess Leia," like blah blah blah. I want to be for her for Halloween, that kind of shit. And my mom was like, "I want to be Chewbacca." Like
That's awesome.
Like that's my mom for you.
He could rip people's arms off. Why would you disagree with this?
I mean, he's awesome. He's fun. I mean, to an extent, I want a Chewbacca.
He's the only one, I think, in the original trilogy that made a fourth wall reference when he did the Tarzan yell that in Return of the Jedi. Everything else is so in canon that they kept it that way. But even then, Chewie just has amazing points throughout each movie. Whether it's just like he gets to have that moment in A New Hope where Wookiees are known to do that, kid. And then Episode 5, I especially loved him trying to rebuild C-3PO. That was amazing to be able to watch because he got it all. You put me together backwards. I love that moment. He's like, "Shut up!" And then probably my favorite Return of the Jedi moment would be on Endor, where he's basically the god of the. I was about to say the god of the Wookiees, but no, the god of the Ewoks.
Oh, C-3PO.
No. I'm saying like he's the bigger Ewok, and a lot of the victories that they had were because of him, like the fact that he could pilot an AT-ST and all that. No, Chewbacca is amazing. He's an amazing character to be able to follow.
I mean, once I unlock him in like Lego Star Wars, I don't play anybody else.
or actually, I would say a lot of the really good comedy moments in Force Awakens were to Chewie. Just, with him trying to beat the crap out of Finn, or trying to get Han, or Han basically trying to take his bowcaster away from him. So many great things. Okay, so we have some awesome characters to be able to bring in there. Now we've done heroes. Who are our favorite villains of Star Wars? And that's difficult because a lot of people go towards the default answer, Darth Vader. So I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna do like favorite Sith Lords kind of thing, because you have Palpatine and you have Vader, but that also allows for characters like Maul, Dooku, be able to do those, and then also if you want to bring in Kylo Ren into the mix, so do that, and then also favorite like side villain. And for me, I gotta go with the original. I gotta go with Darth Vader. Darth Vader is like one of the few that has such lasting power. Just seeing that black armor going down the hallway, you're not going to survive. In fact, one of my favorite things that happened at a Rogue One is we just got to see how vicious Vader is. And the only time that expanded universe people had ever seen it was The Force Unleashed, where he joins the assault on Kashyyyk. And you're giggling at this one, Romney, but that's a moment of power in that game.
I know. It's just I'm just reminded of an achievement you get from that opening level where it literally is worst day shift manager ever.
Yes, exactly.
and to kind of explain, there's this web series called Chad Vader, and he's basically
I love Chad Vader.
He's basically a manager at a grocery store. And the funny thing is, the person who played Chad Vader is now the official voice of Darth Vader in the games and in the TV
I haven't seen
shows.
any of this stuff, but people did bring to my attention that.
Yeah, and so that's why they have that achievement in The Force Awakens of worst day shift manager ever. When you I think it's when you kill a bunch of your own guys during that level, you get that achievement saying like worst day shift manager ever.
But again,
that's awesome.
But again, with Vader, not only do you get the amazing scenes like in Rogue One, where he's just ripping people apart, and he's really like one of the main focuses of that movie. You also, when you go into like expanded universe canon, you don't realize just how powerful Vader still is, even though he's been seriously hampered by his incident on Mustafar. And also the cool part about Vader is that, they said it so many times in the original trilogy that Darth Vader betrayed and destroyed, or betrayed and murdered Anakin Skywalker. And when you get into expanded universe canon, you don't even know the half of it. It's like there are multiple personalities, and the Vader personality just took over. And it's only Vader at that point. It's not even Anakin anymore. So that would be my favorite main villain. And I'm just gonna throw out some love to as a side villain, because everybody knows Palpatine's amazing, and I don't even need to point that out. Especially, again, go watch Clone Wars, because you get to actually have a badass moment with him. Where he gets to take on Maul and his apprentice, and he does it like with very little effort. So it's like, oh, we're going to establish this guy has a lot of power. Yes, he does. But the other one I'm going to give it to is, I got to, and that is Peter Cushing himself, Grand Moff Tarkin. For crying out loud, like even in the expanded universe canon, you get so much more on that character and just how Hitler-esque that guy was. Like, everybody thinks that the real Hitler figure is the Emperor, but then you go a couple of steps down and you realize there are other Hitler figures below the Hitler figure. And Tarkin, especially, as much as I give the Buddha face a little bit of crap on Rogue One, the scenes that you do get with Tarkin are absolutely menacing. And you immediately feel bad for this researcher whenever he disappoints Tarkin. And that's the character that I think even Peter Cushing was trying to show in the little screen time he had in A New Hope. Is this guy is evil incarnate. You don't even need to see the Emperor. This is as nasty as it gets. And so I'll give it over to Grand Moff Tarkin. And expanded universe, if I got to throw it in there, I got to go to Grand Admiral Thrawn, because if there was anybody that was absolutely worse than Grand Moff Tarkin, it would be Thrawn. Thrawn is that nasty. And then we'll go Brinton next. So your favorite villains of Star Wars?
So I may be the only one who says this, and I don't know if either Romney or Alex will say it, but I'm actually really digging Kylo Ren.
I'll admit, like, I wasn't entirely digging him in Force Awakens, but Last Jedi kind of moved me over, or won me over. So I'm at least there on Last Jedi.
I don't know, like even in The Force Awakens for me, as kind of like, what's the best way to put this? I mean, I kind of felt like he was no, that's not the best way to put it. I'm like, I'm talking out loud now for some reason, but I don't know. I just love the conflict that is just like within him.
Yes.
I love the fact that, like, I feel like his character is somebody who was presented the opportunity for a lot of power, much as like Anakin was, and he took it not fully knowing the disastrous effects that could come from accepting and trying to control such great power. Somebody obviously needed to speak with Spider-Man, but
the only reason I can't take Kylo seriously is actually kind of partially responsible from him and Aldo when they were constantly making jokes after Force Awakens, like, could somebody please give Kylo a stress ball because of the temper tantrums he was having. But that's the cool part about Last Jedi is he had those tantrums again, but that actually felt powerful.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I guess I always kind of, when I see people like that, I always like taking the psychological approach or just trying to figure out, why do you act this way? What could have possibly happened to you?
Yeah.
What kind of trauma did you experience for you to begin ever acting like this? And I mean, like, I know you don't like Han, but he had like a kind of a cool dad. His mom was pretty badass. He had a pretty sweet uncle who taught him the ways of like the Jedi Order. And then he just like completely threw that all the way to fall to the dark side of the Force. And you can see that is a huge major point of conflict for him. Even in The Last Jedi, you notice that a lot, that he's struggling. And of course, if we have an opportunity to speak more about that, I'll talk more kind of like my viewpoint as his character evolved in The Last Jedi, but I'm really digging him. He's pretty awesome.
All right.
And he's just interesting to observe. And I know it's fictitious, but I don't know. I guess I just get off at analyzing and observing fictitious characters. So.
I like it personally. I want to see, that's something I want to see more, is like these psychological breakdown of like every fictional character imaginable, because it fascinates me to get inside a character's head.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a whole subgenre on the internet doing that sort of thing.
Yep. I
got to get myself into that community then. I don't really have like that's really the only answer I have. I don't really have like a favorite side villain.
Okay.
Like Kylo Ren, that's my answer.
Yeah, all right. Alex, your favorite villain and favorite side villain.
Yeah, I'd also go with you that Darth Vader still stands as my favorite. Mostly because I always felt like he did have that presence to be commanded, especially in Empire Strikes Back. Yes. In A New Hope, he's there, of course. But in Empire, it's when he really has the presence to be commanded, because he just executes his generals or admirals left and right for their failures.
Well, the part that I think kind of cements the argument is like in A New Hope he was way too aggressive. Now with Rogue One we can see why he was all that aggressive, but at that point it was just like he was kind of like how people perceive Kylo in Force Awakens. He was just way too angry. And then what they did with Empire, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, is they turned on the subtle a little bit more with him. And then we had all those executions of the captains and the admirals, and you got to see people kind of quickly rise above the ranks if they ever disappointed him. So much so, like to the point of mere interruption. Like people were fearing for their life. Like one of my favorite moments in that whole thing is going into his, I guess it's a simulation chamber, but it was more like a silent echo chamber kind of thing to feel the Force. Where Admiral Piet has to come in and tell him the bad news that they've escaped him yet again, but he knows that's not necessarily the case. He's thought ahead. So I love the fact that they even did this.
Yeah, and another makes me think, adding on to that, like it's right after the Falcon escapes out from Cloud City, and Vader's just, at this point, he's done. He doesn't do anything, but that kind of again shows you that he's just done, and it's just perfect the way the scene is shot, the way it's structured. The Admiral's thinking, oh, Vader's totally gonna kill me right now, but Vader just walks on and moves along, and that's it. And another great scene just to show Vader's menace is really the moment Luke comes to confront him on Cloud City.
Yeah.
When he just enters the chamber, the carbonate chamber.
Oh, you're talking the epic moment where the lightsabers come out.
Yeah, everything leading up to that. I mean, Luke comes into this dark chamber. It's very quiet, and you just hear his breathing, and he's like, "The Force is strong with you, Skywalker."
It's one of those things that I love you, George Lucas, but and if you were part of that scene, I take this back, but that's why you needed other directors, is because nobody could have, like, if you look at A New Hope compared to Empire, there's no way you could have painted the scene like that in A New Hope. You couldn't have done it.
Yeah, and very much you needed the Lawrence Kasdan and Irvin Kershner's to bring that sort of atmosphere to life.
Yeah, because that's really a moment that epitomizes the fact of a David versus Goliath battle that Luke versus Vader was.
Yeah. As for side villains, I guess you could count him as a side villain here. It would be Count Dooku from episode 2 and 3.
Yeah, I'm counting.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me that Count Dooku was an older, experienced Jedi who just left the Order on his free will, and because he grew fed up with it and decided, I think Darth Tyrannus has more going here than I think, and I think the Jedi Order's corrupt, and that's why I'm joining. It's not just, where Kylo Ren and Anakin Skywalker fall by temptation of power. Dooku just leaves on his own free accord.
And it's especially telling when you see, because the thing people kind of forget is that Dooku was Qui-Gon's master, and so you can kind of see where Qui-Gon's rebellious streak more or less came from.
Not only that, he was Qui-Gon's master, but up until that point, like, it wasn't really established well in the movies, but Yoda did take on multiple apprentices, and pretty much any youngling that was in the temple was technically Yoda's apprentice, but up until that point, movie 2 established him as Yoda's apprentice. So it's like, Yoda, this pinnacle, this paragon of goodness, and you fell to the dark side. That's telling, as far as anybody is concerned. Go ahead, sorry.
That's pretty much it. I don't really have an expanded universe villain.
Okay. I would technically say Dooku, like, especially when you go into like the Clone Wars Dooku, there's even more there.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I do love about Dooku is that the viewer knows who Tyrannus is, not anybody else. Because we all saw the scene between him and the Emperor, just, welcome home, Lord Tyrannus. And it took Clone Wars to actually find out, like, for the Jedi to find out who Darth Tyrannus was. Up until that point, they knew that this Tyrannus guy had worked something out with Jango, and they knew nothing more about that character.
Yeah, although they do mention in, at least, because I know at the very least when they're briefing Padme about it in episode 2, by that point they at least know, I guess maybe they don't know that Dooku's Darth Tyrannus, but they do know that Dooku is part of the Separatists and that he's one of the major leaders.
Well, they know that Dooku is, but they don't know that necessarily Dooku is Tyrannus. The first reference to Tyrannus is from Jango, where he's like, "No, I didn't take a deal from anybody. I took a deal from a guy named Tyrannus off the moons of Bogdan." And he didn't say who the guy was or anything like that.
Yeah, it was a weird, because I remember seeing the scene that explained that in Bounty Hunter, and it was weird.
It was weird.
The final boss battle in Bounty Hunter is weird.
Yeah, it really is. So, and Jango's canon got kind of effed up because of Bounty Hunter. So at that point, all right, so you have Dooku and you have Vader. Romney, who are you stepping up as your favorite villains?
Well, I guess for like main villain, it would have to be the Emperor. Because mainly, I mean, one, to kind of borrow the phrase from Harry Plinkett, in the prequels, he looks like the only character who's having any fun with what he's doing. I mean, it's very much a case of he's evil, he's Machiavellian, he's basically manipulating. It's very much, hey, these Jedi and these senators, they're all my puppets, and I'm manipulating them at will. And then you just see how that sense of power further twisted Palpatine between the events of the prequel trilogy to the end of Return of the Jedi. Now, a lot of people... It is a criticism people brought up of, oh, well, all Siths can use Force Lightning. But when you consider Palpatine as a character where his power, his abilities with the dark side of the Force is so strong, it's very much a case of, oh, if he wanted to, he could have just stopped Luke's heart to just kill him and drop him like that. But he doesn't. Why? Because he wants him to suffer. It's very much, oh, well, I see someone who's younger, more powerful, and he still has most of his limbs. So, hey, join the dark side. You know that deep down you're just exactly like your father. But then when Luke doesn't turn, he's like, oh, okay, then I'm going to make you suffer then. And thus zapping him like crazy. And it's very much because he is that powerful. He's like, yeah, I know I can do this. And there's not a damn thing you can do to stop me. No. So, yeah, I gave you a chance. But guess what? You're now going to be a battery for a while.
Mm-hmm. And the cool part also about Sidious is, or Palpatine in a way, is like you see his lust for power come out so very little. Like he can literally hide it very, very well. But in tandem with that, he is the puppet master. Everything is under his control.
Yep. And especially when Anakin, and that's one of the scenes that I do like from Revenge of the Sith, when Anakin first confronts him and even pulls out his lightsaber, and he's just like, are you going to kill me? And he's just like, I want to. And she's like, oh yes. And I mean, it is kind of like Palpatine's kind of getting off on it. It's like, oh yes, I know you want to kill me. I know that deep down that's what you want to do, because this is really who you are. You're not really a Jedi. You don't want to follow their ways. You want to basically whip out the lightsaber and start slashing things left and right. And just that push and pull between Anakin and Palpatine. Again, if it was a much better movie, that would have been more the focus. But that's one thing I liked, is just that push and pull of it's very much. I guess the best comparison is like with Hannibal Lecter, when he's immediately pegged Agent Starling or Ed Norton's character in Red Dragon, where he immediately, it's very much, okay, prior to this, he didn't really have a bang, and he's just like, oh, now I know your weakness. Now I know what button to push, and I'm going to push it. And what does Palpatine do with Anakin's like, oh, I know that you're frustrated with the Jedi. Oh, you're having dreams that your wife is going to die in childbirth. I can help you. I'm going to push this button to get you to do what I want.
And then we got one of the best scenes in episode 3, where he told the tale of Darth Plagueis. But the other thing too is, like, you kind of pegged it. He's the master manipulator. Not only did he know how to pull Anakin's strings, he knew how to pull Yoda's strings. He knew how to pull everybody's strings. And again, I'm trying very hard not to bring expanded universe all the time, but people don't even realize just how in control Palpatine was at the end of that. Everything was going according to plan for him. Very little wasn't going according to plan. I mean, he literally was able to set things up so that the Jedi were the enemy. And it looked like they were the enemy. And it gave enough of a situation where this empire that he'd always wanted was deemed necessary. And therefore, he, not only did he take complete control over the army, but he also was able to create the Galactic Empire in the way that he wanted. And even when he died, he had plans in place that were basically scorched earth kind of thing. Like, if I can't have it, no one else will.
Yeah, much like how an actual dictator would run things. Yeah. And that's one thing to Lucas's credit, is that I do like that he did pull a lot of things like that from history. Yeah, because I think
Palpatine is a lot of his design, isn't he? I don't think a lot of directors manipulated that.
Yeah, not a lot of people. There weren't a lot of changes with Palpatine, and it's especially telling considering that in an earlier draft of Star Wars, the Emperor was meant to be an allegory for Richard Nixon. I'm not making this up.
True.
Yeah, he was.
Well, yeah, because people forget, before making Star Wars, Lucas was being set up with a project that would be like his big passion project, that like all of his friends were behind him. It's like, oh yeah, go forth and do it. And what was that project? Apocalypse Now. But after a while, he's just like, we don't really have anything like Flash Gordon or any of these superhero things that we had growing up that made us want to go into film. I kind of want to make something like that. And so, turning down Apocalypse Now, he went to do A New Hope. And so it's just, you see like those elements, and it's a case of, that's where I'm thinking, okay, there is some method to Lucas's madness. It's just a case he needs people there to manipulate that madness to create something great. And that's why, as the nice counterpoint to Obi-Wan, Palpatine is the other good thing from the prequels, because you see that rise of power.
Yes.
And even, it was something I noticed even like looking at the Phantom Menace, where when he sees Anakin and like knows how Anakin as a kid destroy the droid controls, like, oh yeah, well, it's like, we're going to keep an eye on you with great interest. And it's a case of, because he knows that there's something with this kid.
Yeah.
He just doesn't know how to use him yet, but he knows there's something. So even back then, he could tell, oh, this is a potential piece that I'll need to use.
Yep. So just to kind of bring things into, because we got to actually wrap things up, and the final question that I want to get into is, more importantly, Star Wars isn't done. We've been talking a lot about the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. You brought up Kylo Ren here and there, but we have an existing trilogy that's going on right now, and we even have additional movies that are going to be coming out. We've already had Rogue One, which told the story of how the rebellion got the plans for the Death Star in the first place. We are now going to be getting also a Han Solo movie that I think is coming out next summer, isn't it?
Yes.
So a Han Solo movie, we don't really know what that's detailing in Han's life, but that'll be awesome to be able to see. After episode 9, there's still supposedly a Boba Fett movie that's going to be coming out, kind of chronicling his life, from what I understand, from childhood all the way up to where he was in Return of the Jedi before, the unfortunate Sarlacc incident, which was one of many for poor Boba. See, sometimes the expanded universe canon is amazing, and then you also have moments where Boba Fett was swallowed by the Sarlacc monster 4 times.
Oh my gosh.
Not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 times.
4 times.
Which means he survived 3 times. And he still ended up in the Star... you'd think after the second time, he'd avoid Tatooine like the plague.
Yeah, but then again, that's what happens when you work for Jabba, who was going to be like my other favorite villain is Jabba the Hutt, but it's also that same case, that sense of influence. Even though Jabba literally can't move, you know how much power he exerts.
Yes.
So even though it would be in Boba's best interest to avoid Tatooine, it's a case of, well, he's got the money. I mean, he's the one who's put out this bounty on Han Solo.
Yeah, exactly. So going into the existing movies and also the Disney acquisition, like, are we optimistic about where Star Wars is going moving forward? I mean, we still have the Han Solo movie to look forward to. We have Episode 9, which does it have a new director?
Yeah, J.J. Abrams is directing Episode 9 after Colin Trevorrow, I think, got canned,
Yeah, he got canned. So we have that, and then we also have the Boba Fett movie, and eventually a brand new trilogy that's being written and produced by Rian Johnson. So that shows how good of a relationship you have with Disney. Where do we see Star Wars moving forward? Are we optimistic about it, or are we more negative about it going forward? Obviously, The Last Jedi just barely came out, so without spoiling, because we'll be spoiling the hell out of it in part 2, where do you see this trilogy moving forward? Are you optimistic about it, or are you hating where they're going? I personally can say I'm loving where they're going. Because even though I get a lot of the dislike that happened with Force Awakens, you guys can kind of attest to this, both Alex and Romney, is like, I still walked away getting everything that I wanted out of it. Last Jedi did the same thing. Rogue One, you and I saw it, Romney, and we were both really into what they were doing. I'm only optimistic. Every new movie that we get from Disney just makes me even more optimistic about the next episode or the next side story that they're going to try and tell. So let's go ahead and go with Romney first.
Well, I'm of 2 minds on this. In regards to the direction of the current trilogy, I'm fairly optimistic, although I'm still not particularly enthused with the fact that Abrams is going to be directing Episode 9, because again, I've voiced my complaints about The Force Awakens, and to kind of summarize briefly, Abrams, he's good at building a mystery, but when it comes to composing images, it's not a strong suit.
Well, the other thing that we have to consider is like the ones that we're concerned about, the problem films in this are the ones that are coming up. So we have Han Solo, which was originally supposed to be directed by the people who made the Lego movie.
Yeah, Phil Lord and Chris Miller. And then they had to bring in Ron
Howard to be able to finish that out. You had Colin Trevorrow,
who
was brought in and then got canned, and now they're having to have JJ step in to fix the problem. And Boba Fett has gone through how many directors and writers since then?
Yeah, so many. And
so we're actually coming up on the problem fills as of right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I'm of 2 minds. So direction of the current trilogy, I'm optimistic, especially given the groundwork we got with The Last Jedi, but I also have some problems with The Last Jedi, and I don't know if they're from Johnson himself or stuff that was put in via Kennedy or Abrams, who was also a producer. And the spin-off movies is where I'm kind of worried because of what we've mentioned. The Han Solo movie, and from what I've heard, they were like halfway through production when Lord and Miller were fired. It wasn't like, it was very much...
Yeah, it was like half to 75%.
Yeah, like they were almost done shooting the thing, and then Kathleen Kennedy fired them and they had to bring in Ron Howard. So whenever that happens with a film, and it's something we saw with the Attack on Titan movie, where you can tell that certain scenes had one director and certain scenes had another, and sometimes you can make a film work with such a disjointed tone, but it shows, and that's what I'm worried about with the spin-off movies. And as for the new trilogy, knowing that Rian Johnson is at the helm, I'm not nearly as worried, because Rian Johnson is probably one of my favorite modern filmmakers, because I absolutely loved Looper. He has a really good sense of using the visuals to reinforce the narrative, something that a lot of filmmakers nowadays just don't know how to do, and it's frustrating. And so I'm optimistic about the direction of the current trilogy. The spin-off movies, not so much. And that's kind of where I'm worried, because they're trying to basically force Star Wars into the same Marvel model of trying to create the case of, oh, we're going to try to hammer out multiple movies a year instead of, having the one good movie come out each year.
Which is worrying because, like, we don't want to have... a lot of people don't see the downside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that eventually people are going to get tired of it.
I'm already tired of it. That's why I don't review.
You're already there. Like, some of us are already kind of getting there. I'm kind of getting there. Like, Infinity War, to me, almost seems like a really good stopping point because then at that point, all the changes are going to come in. So if they put it into the exact same model as the Star Wars universe into the exact same model, people are going to get tired of Star Wars. And I can't even believe I'm saying that, but it's entirely possible.
Yeah, because you don't want to oversaturate your market. And that's kind of what worries me. Hopefully, Kathleen Kennedy is... because she very much cares about the franchise. She's trying to keep a good degree of control. So hopefully it won't get to that point. But I'm just worried with Disney's influence, they may try to force it into that point.
Yeah, they'll probably... That's actually my worry too, is that Disney will eventually get into the cash cow mentality and they'll start wanting to milk these things for all they're worth. But the problem is their audience is eventually just going to get bored because there's not really anything different you're doing.
Yep.
Alex, where are you standing with the new trilogies?
I think my thoughts line up exactly with Romney's. It's both a sense of optimism, but also a sense of concern because of the extreme amount of movies that are coming out. Even though as somebody who didn't get much into the extended universe as a kid, this sounded like the greatest idea ever to have more and more movies, but there is that sense there's a building bubble. How long till it bursts, and how long before we're all just fatigued and kind of sick of it. We made the Marvel example. Yes, I think we're all getting a little fatigued with Marvel movies right now. So that's my concern.
And we're right now with the Star Wars movies where we were when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was starting.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And with the spin-off movies, it seems like they're having a lot of problems kind of keeping those together, keeping those running smoothly. They can't seem to lock down the Boba Fett movie for production. They had bumped heads with Phil Lord, Chris Miller, which led them to getting fired. It's sort of like, how much is Disney wanting to control? I mean, they spent $1 billion on this. Can you really blame them?
Yeah.
And how much are they going to let the filmmakers be ambitious, a little ambitious with it? Just as George Lucas was able to be ambitious with the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy.
Yep. All right. And then Brinton, what are your thoughts on it?
Again, not to repeat that which has already been stated. I'm happy with what I've seen so far. The fact that you mentioned a possible episodes 10 through 12, that actually kind of bothers me.
Yeah.
I was actually talking about this with some of this.
They wouldn't be episodes. They've already been confirmed they would be in a whole different area of the galaxy and with different characters.
Okay. That makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
But still, like I was about to say, I was talking to some of the students that I work with at Alta, and I was saying I feel like they could wrap up trilogies with episode 9 and just conclude it. I'm not I was a little worried when they announced episode 7 after Disney bought Lucasfilms, and I was like, do we really need an episode 7? Because obviously episode 8 and 9 was a thing that everybody automatically knew was going to happen because Disney's just notorious about sequels. And sometimes Disney makes a good sequel, sometimes Disney doesn't make a good sequel. It's flip and flop.
Yeah.
I was happy with A Force Awakens 2 years ago. I was pretty happy with The Last Jedi this past Friday. I loved Rogue One. Rogue One was super awesome last year, which was a nice little filler to wait for, this past Friday. But the idea of a possible 10 through 12-esque episode trilogy, I'm not excited for that idea at all. I think ending it with Boba Fett and calling it good and just letting Disney
letting it sit for 5 years.
Yeah, and the thing is, we've mentioned Marvel a few times, and I find it funny because this is the Star Wars podcast. But I mean, I'm not fatigued yet with Marvel.
Yeah.
But I do feel at a certain point
You're kind of getting there.
I eventually will get there.
Yeah.
There have been rumors of a phase 4. I am not all if they say there's a phase 4, I'm done. I
almost
can't.
want phase 4 to be a reboot kind of thing. Because like Robert Downey Jr. can't be Iron Man forever. That would be a really great time to like reestablish Iron Man.
I mean, I know for the past couple of years, and it's actually almost been a decade because the Hulk came out in 2008.
Holy crap.
2008 for Iron Man. And
Oh my gosh, it's been 10 years. No.
Oh,
Yes, it
wow.
has.
But anyway, I mean, like, if you think about it with Marvel, it's been 10 years.
Yes.
And I understand for this past decade, it's been like books into movies, like comic books into movies. I'm not fatigued, but at the same time, I want to see something. I want to start going to the movies to see something a little bit more original.
Fresh meat, yeah.
I mean, I love the Marvel movies I've seen. I love the fact that we're getting these Star Wars movies, but I mean, by the time it's about, I would say maybe early 2020s, which is when most of these films are going to start wrapping up and coming to an end. I think this little montage of cinematic universes needs to come to a close.
It really does. Yeah.
And I think DC should follow suit with it. I know they kind of started it, but they're late to the game, and I think they need to end it as quickly, like end what they started as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And we start a new era of movie making, or else one of my favorite things that I love doing, which is going to see movies and talking about it with you guys. Like, I'm not going to want to do it anymore.
Exactly, especially with how expensive ticket prices just get year after year.
And they're going to get even more expensive with like technological advances and with how much they're going to be putting into movies. They're going to definitely raise ticket prices again. I can believe it, just so that these films can make a profit.
Yeah.
Not that Star Wars wouldn't be able to make a profit, but I mean, who's not to say that one day somebody's going to put in $5 billion into a movie production, and they're going to have to make that back somehow.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that even people like Spielberg and Lucas have warned people about. I mean, I remember we covered the article back in our Radio SLCC days about how Spielberg was saying, oh yeah, it would cost like $750 to see Lincoln, but it'll cost you like $30 to go see Iron Man. And I mean, I hate to say it, but Spielberg has a point. That is the point where we're getting, especially as less and less people are going to the theaters, meaning that they're going to have to come up with more and more gimmicks. It's the same thing we saw in the 50s with 3D and smell-o-vision, because everyone was staying at home watching TV for free. They had to do these gimmicks to get people to come back. We're kind of reaching that same point again, where now we have good 3D, but there's going to be another gimmick down the road that they're going to try to force down our throats to get people to come back.
I completely agree with you. So for right now, I'm enjoying the ride for what it is, but
the ride eventually has to have an end.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the gas station, and I'm not gonna get back in. I'm just gonna call it good and hitchhike my way home.
Pretty much. And then just kind of as a wrap-up question, because we have been bringing up, we have Rian Johnson, we have J.J. Abrams, we have Tim Lord and Chris Miller, Ron Howard, all that stuff. So this is one of the things I've seen a lot of people speculating online is like, who would, like, if you had a brand new Star Wars project that they could do, which directors would you like Disney to hand the reins to? And this will be kind of like a really great wrap-up for it. For me, I'm just going to go ahead and say this right off the bat. Rian Johnson a while ago would have been my pick. Would have been mine, because at that point I'd seen enough good stuff from him to say, yeah, I think he has potential to be able to do it. But the problem is Last Jedi's come out at this point, so I can't necessarily say him. So I'll say my next best one, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think if you gave him the right idea, Neil Blomkamp could make a Star Wars movie work. He had, before people jump on my throat, he has to have the right idea backing it. Because Neil is good with sci-fi, but he's not necessarily good with all kinds of sci-fi yet. So at that point, if you gave him like, I don't know, a droid movie or something like that, where you give him his ability to shine, I think he'd be able to pull out a really great Star Wars movie. I'm not saying we want a C-3PO movie. I'm saying like it would be awesome if all of a sudden he's like, oh, I can make a droid movie? I will make one on IG-88. And we all think it's amazing.
Well, yeah, in the current expanded universe, there's even characters that he could use, like, because the one character in the comics that was introduced, Dr. Aphra, would probably be a good character for Blomkamp to work with, because she's very much a technologically oriented Star Wars character.
Yeah, so Neil Blomkamp would be my pick. I'm going to go with the film expert here. So, Romney, who's the director you would pick to do a Star Wars film?
Well, it's tough, but I guess in terms of, like, pure feasibility in terms of who they could get, because I mean there are some filmmakers that come to mind, but they wouldn't make a Star Wars movie because of political reasons with their home country. But as for a director, I would want to see at least do something with Star Wars, that would have to be Guillermo del Toro. I definitely would want to see.
Holy crap! I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and this may be because I just barely saw The Shape of Water, but I like in terms like you mentioned, Blomkamp is good with like hard sci-fi. I would want to see how Del Toro would handle like kind of the creatures, even kind of the mystical side of Star Wars. I mean, maybe we would probably get a good version of the Ewok movies, for example, where it explores kind of the fauna and the mystical side of the Star Wars universe. And so that would be something I would want to see.
But the cool part about that also is that Del Toro is such a left hook in that regard. Like he's such a filmmaker that you wouldn't think would take on a Star Wars project. So at that point, he may to put this for somebody who doesn't know as much film as we do. It makes about as much sense to bring Del Toro in to do a Disney movie to do a Star Wars movie as Quentin Tarantino. I just can't see it in my head, Tarantino accepting a Star Wars movie.
Well, especially after
Star Trek.
Well, yeah,
he's doing Star Trek. Yes.
Well, yeah, and especially after the whole dispute with The Hateful Eight and The Force Awakens edging out The Hateful Eight out of certain theaters because of the projectors.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but yeah, and I guess a close second, and this would be like a director I would like to see, and again, because I recently saw a film they made, and that would be Derek Yee. Derek Yee is a director. He's done a lot of wuxia films in China. The most recent one I saw, which is why he's in my mind, is Swordmaster, which is a wuxia film. And so I would definitely, even if it's not Derek Yee, I would definitely would want to see a Chinese or Hong Kong filmmaker given a Star Wars movie, just to see what that would look like, to see would it be a martial arts movie that just happens to be set in the Star Wars universe.
I immediately scream, give them the Old Republic. Just give them the Old Republic and let us have like wushu lightsaber fights. That would be amazing.
Yeah, so like people like Derek Yee, Zhang Yimou, but again, because Zhang Yimou is the director who spends every other film release in a jail cell, plus The Great Wall, enough said. So yeah, like main choice, Guillermo del Toro, I would want to see what he would do with the Star Wars universe, even if it is just a side story. I just want to see what his mind would come up with.
All right, and so I'm actually going to pull a swerve here. Brinton, your pick for a director for a Star Wars film.
Oh man, that definitely was a swerve.
We'll finish things with Alex because he's kind of he's the anime expert and also he's also a little bit of a movie expert in his own right. So at that point, I also would love to hear like an anime studio or something like that. Get thinking on that, Alex.
All right.
Alex is like, I've already made up my mind, but I guess I'll make a new one. Honestly, I like whenever I went to go see films, I didn't really like look at movies the way that you guys do.
Yeah.
I've started to look at it more that way as I've come to be part of this community and to get to know like all of you a lot better. So honestly, I don't really have an answer because I'm still learning like how certain directors direct their films and like remember. I mean, like for example, I could easily say like, oh, Zack Snyder, like Batman versus Superman. Why? Like, but then I can turn that around and be like, I feel like he's he's trying to make a comeback and he's realized from his mistakes, and I like Justice League, the end. So I can make simple comments like comments like that, but I don't have as much of a director knowledge base or an understanding, to your point, to really answer this question, unfortunately.
Oh, trust me, I don't have that much of a director knowledge base. I'm just winging it.
And to kind
oh my gosh.
Although the idea of Snyder directing a Star Wars movie isn't too far-fetched, because as a director, he strikes me as the kind of director that needs to be paired with the right people. So if you were to pair someone like Snyder with someone as firm as Kathleen Kennedy, you probably would get something pretty decent.
Well, it's the same argument that we made I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where Ron Howard makes sense that Kathleen Kennedy would pick him because he's a very political director. He can play the politics of the studios and all that. Zach can do the exact same thing, and I hate to say it, so can Michael Bay, kind of thing. So like those are kind of the people that you would expect to be like likely candidates for these movies, just because they know what to say right to appease the studio, kind of thing. All right, and then Alex, and I'm tacking one on because you're the anime reviewer, and this is the 12 Days of Anime, for crying out loud. Give me a studio that should take on Star Wars.
All right. So, you want me to start with the anime studio then?
Start with the director.
All right, start with as far as like say live action directors, Del Toro and Blomkamp are great. I actually was going to say Blomkamp too.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering.
Even though Blomkamp's experience is a lot more with harder sci-fi, he definitely has the effects knowledge. I think Dean Israelite's really an up and coming because Power Rangers was a pretty decent movie.
You know, if we were in the Project Almanac days, I wouldn't agree with you, but Power Rangers has brought me over to
I'd
him.
still, even with Project Almanac, I don't think Project Almanac was a terrible movie. It's just
No, but I'm saying like Power Rangers really warmed me to the guy.
I suppose one more that comes to mind would be David Fincher, seeing as he's had experience at ILM because he started with ILM as a director.
And I know Luke has actually tried getting him to direct a Star Wars movie at some point in the past,
Yes.
both Fincher and Lynch.
Can't remember which one though, but I think so. It was one of the prequel movies, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Possibly. This was like shortly after the release of Return of the Jedi, even back when he was initially wanting to make 3 trilogies with the same characters, which, yes, that was a thing.
You know, Fincher, even though he hasn't done anything really like big in spectacle films, it's like Star Wars, he definitely has the effects experience, not just from his Star Wars days, but even on the Social Network where they digitally replaced they replaced the other actor to put Armie Hammer's face on the other actor to fill the Winklevoss twin role. So Fincher has the effects experience and he's had the experience with ILM, and he's a pretty good storyteller as directors go. So there you go. I'd say David Fincher, Neil Blomkamp, and Dean Israelite for my choices.
All right.
As for
Anime Studio.
Anime Studio, this could kind of go almost any way.
See, I'd almost hand it to Bones. I love what Bones does with properties like this.
Yeah,
but...
Bones has a lot of sci-fi. I think Production IG would probably be a good safe bet.
IG would be.
Was the one I first thought.
Yeah, just because they've had tons and tons of experience in sci-fi shows like this. So does Bones, because Bones has like Eureka 7, and Sunrise would probably be another one because Sunrise has the whole Gundam to them. This is why, for the longest time, and I don't count on this happening now that Disney has it, but I was always hoping we'd kind of get one of these anime anthology collections like we had with Batman, like we had with Halo, where they just gather a bunch of studios together.
Oh, you mean like for a Star Wars DVD?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be
and
great.
just gather a bunch of different studios and different directors and have them make little 5, 10 minute, 15 minute shorts.
Yeah, because like one I would want to see to throw an anime studio in there I definitely would want to see what Studio Kara would do with Star Wars.
Yeah.
I'm going off of the work they did for Fire Emblem Fates and Fire Emblem Warriors, because they did a lot of those cutscenes, and I'm thinking
Kara's on a studio.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so I definitely would want to see, even if they just, hey, make a Star Wars Warriors game, I would want to see what Studio Kara would do with that concept.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I would. That's fair. Oh my gosh, I want that now. How can we get this to happen?
Well, we would have to convince EA to partner with Koei Tecmo and Team Ninja, which I don't see happening. What have I done, people?
Well, it's either that or I squee. Which one would you like?
Gainax is another studio.
Oh, wow. Because, I mean, Gainax is still, like, dedicated fans. So at that point...
I mean, even though I think Gainax and Trigger and Kara, just all the sort of studios that splintered off from Gainax originally, all 3 of them should get Star Wars because they were packed filled with fanboys.
I'm starting to be in your camp. I actually want to see all those studios do like little 10-minute segments and try to earn their way.
And one filmmaker that, now that we're talking like animation, I would definitely want to see what Shinji Aramaki would do with a Star Wars, like just as a Star Wars spinoff. When you look at the way Clone Wars is done, if they just made a spinoff movie set in the time of Clone Wars but gave it to Aramaki's team, I think that would be something pretty cool to watch.
All right, and so there you go. We have some amazing ones. I'm kind of surprised that, well, I'm sure a few people will throw out people like Joss Whedon or the Wachowski sisters on why they. I don't necessarily buy that they would be able to do. Like, Whedon's done. I love you, Joss, but you're done, and you don't have. You could go live in your cabin in the woods. You've got your money. You're fine.
Plus, he's already working on Batgirl, so
yeah, he's already working on Batgirl. I think he's got a little bit more of a future with superheroes than he does with sci-fi. Sci-fi's never really been his thing aside from Firefly, but even then, like, Firefly is oozing Western, so that more goes into his wheelhouse. The Wachowski sisters, I get that they did The Matrix and they've done some good CG work to some people for Speed Racer. I just don't know if I would hand Star Wars over to them.
Again, the best case to see if
I'm worried they get overly philosophical with it.
I completely agree with you. I was not a huge fan of. They did Sense8. Am I mistaken with that?
I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I've seen their name pop up under direction for Sense8, and I mean,
yeah, and if you want to see how they would handle the fantastical sci-fi, Jupiter Ascending,
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to see what Star Wars would probably look like, that's probably a pretty good indicator. And, well, that film did not do too well, so I don't think Disney's eager to give them a call.
Yeah.
Well, I like Jupiter Ascending. It was different.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Kathleen Kennedy doesn't want different.
Okay, yeah, that's
mainstream.
I forgot this is Disney we're talking about.
Yeah, 'cause we have to pick a director that like will get through the Kathleen Kennedy the filter and be able to appease Disney well enough. And I even then I still have some misgivings about Neil. I've heard he's a bit of a boat rocker, so at that point he might not necessarily get past Kathleen, but I would like to hope that he did, kind of thing.
Yeah, and with Del Toro, I haven't heard, like, he does know when to play ball, but it very much is a kind of director that likes to do his own thing. So I'm of the opinion that
but he's gonna push the boundary a little bit.
Yeah, and it's more of a case that if he were offered, he would probably turn it down for that same reason, where he wants to do something original. Because it's something that you see with certain directors. That's what happened with Stephen Chow when he was offered to do Dragon Ball, and he turned it down, thus leading to Dragon Ball Evolution.
Yeah. All right, and that's actually a really good wrapping up point. So, like I said, this is not officially done. This is the wrap up for Why We Geek, and thank you guys so much for joining me on this wild ride, starting this podcast literally in January and just doing once a month as we go along. And this is not the end, by the way. A lot of people have asked, like, well, by December you'll probably end it. No, we're not done. There's enough appeal for it that we are going to be going into next year. I've already got like the first 4 months all set up. So you guys have plenty to look forward to. But in the meantime, in case you guys don't want to see part 2 of us taking apart and spoiling the hell out of The Last Jedi, at least not right away, if you want to get a hold of the various panelists and talk to them about Star Wars and their various opinions, we're going to start with Brinton. How do they do that for you?
I can be found on Twitter at bvalli01, so BVALLI01, because my last name's spelled different. And then from there, if you find me on Twitter, you can click on a link in my bio that takes you to my YouTube channel where I do gaming Let's Play content. I'm taking this next week and a half to prep myself and kind of get my channel all like cleaned up and squared away for 2018. So I will be getting back to doing content soon, which I'm excited to do, considering that I passed my psychometrics exam.
Woo!
And oh my gosh, I never want to take that class again. But I mean,
and yet you never do.
I better not. For the love of God, if I'm told that I have to retake the class for a higher grade to graduate, I'm just going to be like, fuck you, I'm not doing it.
That would suck.
I've paid for this class twice. You give me a better grade.
Well, there's the expletive tag now.
We'll add a rooster in or something.
Sorry, that's my bad.
I don't beep. I usually like go find a or I find a
find a moaning sound for me, because this is me we're talking about.
Oh my.
I'm gonna find a bat fleck for you.
I'm okay with that. But yeah, that's me. That's how you can find me.
All of a sudden, there should be like, why is Ben Affleck coming in Commissioner in the middle of a Star Wars thing? Or I'll find a Darth Vader one for you.
Perfect.
Wait, he actually no. There you go. Alex, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, what you can do is actually put a lightsaber turning on over it. You know. Bzzz.
Oh, I think that's
I like the Darth Vader no now.
something Star Wars themed. I feel like that would be appropriate for.
Yeah, maybe an R2 scream.
Yeah, R2 scream.
No, Wookiee. Do Wookiee.
Yeah, do Wookiee.
Wookiee Tarzan. There you go.
Okay, figured it out. Sorry, Alex.
Anyway.
How can we find
me on YouTube? Shadow Blizzard 3000 is my channel, and if you want to follow me on social media and always be alert to new videos, follow me on Twitter at AlexJShort.
All right, and Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, how do people find you?
Well, you can always find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Studio Ghost Utah. I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/Romney's Reviews, no apostrophe, and I'm also on Twitter at Romney Reviews.
All right, and then you guys can follow me on YouTube at Drac2326. If you want to follow the podcast directly, though, you can go to whywegeek.podomatic.com. That is where all the episodes are posted. All 12 of them. It took some doing with the hard drive on Podomatic, but we got all 12 episodes up there, so you guys can enjoy everything from our very start with Disney in January all the way to Star Wars in December. You guys can check all of that out, and then also you can follow Why We Geek on Twitter, which is at Why We Geek. And also, we do have a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/why. I believe you have to search for Why We Geek, and you'll be able to find that. And that's going to go ahead and do it for us. So once again, this is not it. Episode 2 of this, or part 2 of this, is going to go into the Geek News Reviews and Opinions podcast, which we do weekly, where we are going to be spoiling the ever-living hell out of The Last Jedi. So you guys can come and join us. Hopefully you guys will have seen the film by then. But of course, until then, we'll see you guys next time.